There's nothing better than watching a film that inspires you to want to go and make a film. My name's Rory Bentley and I'm a writer and director. I've written and directed a string of short films and I'm currently writing and directing my debut feature film. As an assistant, so a director's assistant, I worked for Paul King, who directed the Paddington movies, on a Disney film. And I also was the second unit director for Raine Allen-Miller on her amazing debut film, Rye Lane. As a writer-director, every day is different. You know, I'd have two jobs, so two very different roles, but they tend to come in like blocked periods. So if I'm writing, it will probably be me at my desk working on a screenplay. Writing can be quite isolated, but also very collaborative. So if I'm at home writing, it's just me and my computer kind of getting on with the project, or it's, you know, a Zoom meeting with, or a meeting in person with, producers and people who are kind of working on the film with me. As a director, you're the head of every creative department, so costume, production design, camera, everything kind of filters up to you. So a lot of the job is answering questions. So I think, you know, the typical kind of quote is a director will be answering like 700 questions a day on set. But a primary focus of that as a director is also working with the actors. So being the first audience member on set and being there to kind of guide and help their performance. Key skills for a writer and director definitely would be teamwork, collaboration, listening, communicating your own ideas, but also I think positive thinking and learning to champion yourself and your vision. I think rejection is really normal in this industry. People at all levels of the industry face rejection all the time. I think we need to normalize that. You have to cultivate self-belief is a really key part of being a writer and director, and just kind of digging into like why you want to tell a story and not letting go. Giving and receiving feedback is a really big part of being a writer and director. As a writer, a lot of the time it's receiving feedback. So you complete a piece of work, it could be a one-pager or a beat sheet or a screenplay, and you send it out to producers and funders. You then receive notes back. So those meetings will typically be somebody has read your work and then you listen for an hour, roughly, whilst they sometimes criticize what you've done or tell you what they loved and what they didn't love. For me, being really open to that and understanding that that is such a necessary part of the process. You know, being a good listener and learning how to take on feedback is a really big part. And then with giving feedback, that's very much more of a directorial kind of job. Knowing how to give feedback in a way that is constructive, but also empowering. I think those are really important ways of doing it. In movies, we've all seen that cliche of the director like barking at everybody with a megaphone. Most directors that I've known or that I've witnessed on sets are actually much kind of more on the back foot and asking questions and sort of like challenging people to be like, well, why do you want to do that? And I think the best directing is when you ask a question and you allow that person to come up with their answer themselves, and then you sort of end up meeting in the middle really in a kind of collaborative way that's fulfilling for everybody. I think the best feedback is actually like saying less, asking more questions about the project. Starting out in the film industry and thinking it's not for you could actually be a really good sign that it is for you, because self-doubt is a huge part of being a creative and being a writer and director. The industry has changed a lot, you know, since I started, and it's becoming much better at bringing people in from the margins. I don't think there's any blueprint, one size fits all, this is my industry. The industry is like so varied, and everybody I meet who works in film has their own unique set of experiences and stories. So I think that actually is a strength. Immediate things that you can do to try and be a writer and director probably would come down to reading and watching things that you connect with, and then asking yourself why you connect with them. As a director, you have to understand how to tell a good story. There's nothing better than watching a film that inspires you to want to go and make a film. And the same could be said for books. You know, if it's not going to the cinema, you know, you can go to a library and read a book. And I think studying the things that have moved and affected you is a really good way to understand your own sense of taste and your own sense of what draws you to storytelling. There are loads of free programs out there, like Celtx is a really good one. CELTX. Anyone can download for free, and you know, you can write a screenplay on your phone, probably on the bus to school. Like, you know, there are loads of apps, and it's really accessible nowadays to like start to think about how you can put things to paper. Great filmmakers have made films on iPhones. You know, no one really has access to cinematic cameras when they're starting out. I know I certainly didn't. but I used whatever I could get my hands on to just make something that was achievable at the time. That typically was me and my friends, like making stuff. You know, on the weekend, we'd just like walk around a park and just shoot things, and just challenging yourself to make things and don't be afraid of making mistakes. Every time you make a mistake, it's about how you get back from that. And I think learning to try and fail is basically the ultimate skill of making anything in the creative space. When I first started, it was a very kind of white and male-dominated environment, and that is certainly changing a lot. I think for me, meeting other people, meeting other mixed-race people, that definitely made me feel like I kind of belonged in this industry. Like my cinematographer, my director of photography, he is also mixed-race, and there's a lot of people out there that share a similar experience to me. And I think finding people that have the same sort of like understanding of the world and people who want to be filmmakers made me feel like, oh, this is actually where I kind of belong. You know, like we've all decided at some point this crazy idea that we want to make films. And when you get in a room with them, you're like, oh, you have so much in common just because of that. You know, the industry is becoming much more inclusive. There are like many more paths into the industry. And I think it's getting better at understanding that, you know, we need to get like-minded people together to start to shape our cultural conversations for the better.